Hey guys, it's Matt. I don't know what to call this type of presentation or broadcast. It's not examining the not nilk. We'll examine the not nilk a bit, but it's not trying to figure out for 2 hours what exactly Melvin P. Gates is. And it's certainly not the old-fashioned radio show. It's a much more serious topic and very few jokes. So this is like an examination of self, but one of the most important questions ever posed. Am I going to have the answer at the end? No, but I'll bring up points on both sides and you can decide for yourself. And hopefully I'll be fair because I have a way that I lean, and that'll probably come out, of course, as the presentation goes on. I lean in one camp here. But the idea is, or the concept behind this presentation, is there a consequence for one's actions on earth? Is there a consequence? Those that firmly believe in consequence are immediately going, what? Of course there's a consequence. Every Christian listening is going, of course, what is this going to be about? I'm telling you, though, the other side, there's a lot of smart people on the other side of this argument. What's going to form the basis of the other side of the argument, Matt? Atheists? No, a whole lot more than that. That's not even going to probably even, if it's a teeter-totter, we're going to go back and forth. Is there consequence to life or not consequence to life? One side isn't just going to be the atheist. That's going to be on one side, is there consequences like 40 million cinder blocks, and on the other side, the teeter-totter is like half a piece of rice. That's the extent of the atheist argument. It's like half a piece of rice. No, atheism is the biggest cerebral sloth. I don't even know how to describe it, because the people that believe in it, most of these academic types or these university types that are complete atheists, in this world, they're the smartest of the smart. They get the most awards and accolades and the most embrace by this system, but then that tells you because everything's reversed. They're so smart in this life, that would make them really dumb spiritually. So no, it's not about the atheists in that side. There's a whole lot of other types of people, some of which are very, very smart, like Alan Watts and others, who come out and say, okay, once you understand who you are, that the atheist position is absurd, you are part of something that always has been and always will be, then this is just simply a learning experience. There's no consequence or old-fashioned Dante's Inferno punishment type thing. And for those that absolutely believe in consequence, whether it just be your belief, your religious views, or whatever, a lot of you in sub-segment are getting your back up. Oh, what's the point of even listening to this? I'm just telling you that the other side is not a bunch of dummies here. All right? They're not a bunch of dummies. I'll just tell you, I wasn't going to tell you where I stand, but I'm just going to tell you where I stand. I might have to do this sooner than I thought. I believe that there is consequence for way of living life. Right? I'm in that camp, but I'm going to try to do the best I can to present the argument of the other camp, okay, that there is no consequence to living life. And it certainly isn't going to be any atheist position. Again, that is absolutely ridiculous. Of course, it's normal and natural that most people are going to be in there is consequence to living life the right way, the moral way, or the wrong way. The reason for that, if nothing else, there's a lot of reasons for that, including religious beliefs and other things. But the basic reason that there's going to be more on this side is because those in this side will have varying degrees of what the consequence is. There are people in my family that go every Sunday to the Catholic Church that believe if they don't live their life a certain way or do a certain thing, literally Dante's Inferno is real and they're going to burn in some sort of hell. I'll talk about that in a moment. I think that is absolutely ridiculous, of course, for a lot of reasons. But not of course, there's a lot of Christians here, but I doubt the people here would say that an eternal hellfire is waiting based on the way you live your life here in this tiny little, you go into the closet for half a second from the perspective of all that ever is and all that ever will be, cosmic perspective looking down. This life is like going into a closet and walking out in a half second. Talk about unfair, basing all of eternity, a beautiful heaven, all your pets come back, family, friends, loved one, rivers of gold, and every abundance, an eternity of heaven. Or burning in hellfire, burning having your limbs just come back and then they just get burned away again, and then they come back and they get burnt for eternity. Based on what? Based on how you lived a small portion of a life, which is the cosmic equivalent of 100 trillionth of a second when you compare it against all that ever was and all that ever will be. And even if you had the whole time to get it right in this life, you were completely, fully conscious and intelligent from birth. You were as intelligent as Dr. Theopolis, that little computer that hung around Tweaky's neck at birth. It takes not 20 years. I was going to say it takes 20 years in this life to get a clue. 20-year-olds running around trying to score pot and get drunk. And it takes 30 years or more before in this life, at least in this modern society, get a clue. And then at some older age, you might lose a little bit of faculties or interest or whatever. So at the most, people have like a 40-year period to get it right. So I'm sorry, all of eternity then is based on 40-year period of living your life a certain way with a judge looking to, come on, man. Who would believe that? That doesn't mean there can still be a lot of Christians that have a relationship with the Christian God or Jesus that don't have to take that literally. Why? There's a tons of contradiction in the Bible saying this works this way, and then in another book will say this works this way. So come on. All of eternity based on, we're not going to spend any more time on this, all of eternity based on how we live our life here. There's not too many people listening to this that would think that applies. This is absurd. Okay, but what I am sure everybody listening to this is very interested in is what are the consequences, ranging from no consequences, this is a learning experience, to a series of consequences. Certainly not, we're never going to go down as far down the line as Dante's Inferno and Dante running around the 9 planes of hell. It's not that, but what are the consequences? You know, how many times has Matt floated out, and my opinions have evolved? I floated this 2 years ago or so when I was told how the Pope said that bad souls don't go to hell, they go to the abyss. And that led me thinking about giving parts of yourself away, giving soul tokens away. So that's a consequence, giving enough of yourself away, potentially, where there is nothing left of you. And you have the recycling trap, the Saturn moon matrix. There's a lot to explore on the back end. The hardest part of this presentation is doing justice to, again, the many smart people over time that would say that this is a learning experience, and the eternal aspect of what you are, your spiritual self, they can't ever take it from you. You can't go to the abyss. I've been emailing back and forth with someone recently who's like, well, of course I'm going to take the action, Jacksonation. I absolutely believe I'm a eternal soul spirit connected to higher self, God, or whatever their personal beliefs might be, but they can't take the essence of what I am away. So why do I want to huddle inside and get Amazon deliveries for the rest of my life? I'm interested in going to a concert once or twice for the rest of my life, or a football game. They can't take the core of my spiritual essence. So this person would say, I'm going to get the action, Jacksonation. More of an Alan Watts theory, where, many of us, obviously for valid reasons, are very skeptical of the action, Jacksonation. And we're not, I think that those that are very, as I am, of course, I don't plan to get it. Right now, I don't plan to get it. I'm prepared to suffer in whatever this life brings me. They're going to send me to Papillon leper colony. Actually, Papillon came across that leper colony, smoked that cigar. We'll talk about that in another video, Steve McQueen's original Papillon. They're going to put me on a Papillon leper colony. At this point, I'm prepared to deal with that. That's just my choice. It might evolve over time. We'll see. Look, the people that say there's no consequence or like a punishment type thing to living life a certain way, again, they're not atheists. They're the opposite of atheists. There might be the complete opposite of atheists, even farther advanced or farther away from the atheist than the person that says there's some sort of consequence for not living life a certain way or in a moral way. Many of these people, this is similar to an Alan Watts philosophy, would say, I'm just going to speak for them if they would allow me to do that. They'd say, I know I'm part of creation itself. I know, or you could, whatever word you want to use. I know I am part of God. I know I am part of the divine. I know I am part of higher self. I know I am part of God. Did I say God? Whatever. Therefore, God separated itself into many, 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 many trillions and trillions of pieces or whatever to have an experience, to learn. God is not going to let, or a part or an aspect of the divine is not going to let itself fall for the tricks of little Melvin P. Gates minions. They would say the essence of who I am, they can't touch it. They can't touch it. So many of these people are going to get the Action Jacksonation, because they would say, well, maybe the Action Jacksonation is going to put little 7 of 9 nano, whatever, into my bloodstream. But that's all. This is the body, the avatar. They'd be like, I don't care about the body, the avatar. I'm just the spiritual self. These people would say they can't touch it. This is the essence of this debate. Now, it's hard to present this as two different positions sitting on either side of the kid's teeter-totter or seesaw, because the side I just talked about, that there is no consequence, the higher aspect of you would never allow anything to happen to the core essence of your spiritual self. It doesn't hold up as well in the teeter-totter because there's so many different variations of the argument on the other side. The sliding scale on the other side is enormous. It's not just Dante's Inferno all the way down the one end of the sliding scale. It's all different, even religions tied in and philosophies tied in. And if you don't do things right, you will repeat the reincarnation, or whether you're forced to do that or it's part of your religious belief. The Tibetan book of the dead, the Tibetan shamans or monks, they speak to the person that had just died, and they chant over the body, trying to get the soul to move to a certain place. So in 40 days or whatever, it doesn't recycle back. So there's the consequences on the other side range from burning hellfire to you didn't get it right. You're not ready to walk out of this game experience. You're not ready to walk out of what your higher self or the divine aspect in you needs to experience. You're just going to have to do it again. And hey, you might have a better life next time. People like Dolores Cannon philosophies, and it's not just her. There's a lot of smart people that talk like this on the other side, that you have to experience all things. You have to be a good guy here, a bad guy here, a black guy here, a white guy here, a man and a woman. You have to experience all things. And you're not ready, you have to prove that you're ready spiritually to kind of walk out of here, to advance. So there's so many variations or degrees of severity, of consequence of living life wrong, or just not caring, or following all the breadcrumbs of the system, or just bowing down to Ryan Seacrest's red carpet show and all that stuff. There's so many variations of getting it right or wrong and consequence that could be applied to living life incorrectly, that this side there's a million more arguments, and it's hard for, on the teeter-totter, the seesaw, the other side to hold up, in my opinion, unless, again, somebody comes forth and says, dude, you don't tell me that, Matt. Somebody might say, I realize I am the part of the divine. Don't tell me that. That nothing can touch me, man, and that's as strong as any. You guys present a million arguments on the other side because you're confused about who you are, and that would be a valid argument. I don't want to put. I'm trying to present both sides here. It's like my cousin Vinny. He's prosecuting Ralph Macchio and trying to defend him at the same time. The two Utes that wouldn't go over too well. That's what I'm trying to do here, Mr. Gambini. Okay, let's do the other side. There's consequence to living life a certain way, and let me start the presentation on the other side with a reading by the famous philosopher, 1724, East Prussia, Immanuel Kant. People are like, oh, reading from Kant? I'm out of here. Give me a minute. Let me start with this, and I'll tie it together. Kant presents the concept of conscience It's exactly why I chose the name that I did, and I didn't even know why I was choosing it, I don't think, when I chose it. Conscience, 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 different from conscious or consciousness. Conscience, spelled like conscience, is a moral compass. All right, and Immanuel Kant, in his treatise Conscience, again spelled conscience, conscience, a moral way of living or a moral guide or a moral compass, that conscience versus, I'm conscious or consciousness or cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. That's conscious. That's the more common version of conscious that doesn't have to do with, the moral aspect. So in Goodfellas, when Ray Liotta, and I was going to say when Ray Liotta working with My Cousin Vinny, but no, Ray Liotta working with Joe Pesci, forget his character's name, when they torched the restaurant. Remember that scene in Goodfellas? They torched the restaurant for the insurance money. They were conscious. conscious. They were conscious when they did it, but they had no conscience. They had no conscience. They had no moral fiber when they torched the restaurant. And for those who remember the scene, it was the restaurant got into some financial trouble. Then you bring Paulie in as a partner. Then you milk the restaurant for all it's worth. You take the liquor out the back. You run up bad debts on the restaurant. And then when there's nothing left and you milked it to nothing, then you can bring in My Cousin Vinny and Ray Liotta and torch it for the insurance money. That's a great example of they're conscious. They're cogito ergo sum. They were thinking about the wrong things, therefore they am. Therefore they're stealing the insurance money in the wrong way. But there's no conscious, no moral fiber. And this relates to what I'm going to read from Immanuel Kant. He says in one part here, conscience, conscience, is an instinct to pass judgment upon ourselves in accordance with moral laws. Turning the page. A criminal lying under sentence of death frets and worries and reproaches himself severely, but mainly for the imprudence which led to his detention. He imagines that it is his conscience which reproaches him for his immorality, but it is not the pangs of conscience that he feels, for had he got off scot-free or never been caught, he would have felt no qualms, and if he had a conscience, he would feel its reproach in any event. He would feel bad, and he's saying here, even if he wasn't caught. We must therefore differentiate between the judgment of prudence and the judgment of conscience. Guys, if you're about to check out, this isn't a 45-minute reading. Just another 30 seconds here. I hear you. It's Immanuel Kant. So it says, he who has no immediate loathing for what is morally wicked and finds no pleasure in what is morally good has no moral feeling, and such a man has no conscience. So a real basic summary of what Immanuel Kant is saying there, and then I'll tie that in to the larger presentation here. Is there a consequence for living your life in a certain way? Remember, that's the whole point here. Didn't just decide to read Immanuel Kant off on the side because I like the way he writes. Immanuel Kant's basically saying, well, the criminal that's caught, he starts to feel really bad. This guy never had a moral compass to begin with. He never had a compass. He feels really bad, and then he almost hopes it's his, I shouldn't have done it. I feel bad. When if he wasn't caught, he'd be sitting on a beach somewhere trying to use whatever he stole to convert that over to bricks of heroin or kilos of heroin. He only feels bad because he was caught, if someone that lacks conscience, but he'll fool himself into thinking he has a conscience, but that it wouldn't be there if he wasn't caught. But the point of what Immanuel Kant is saying, the absolute basic underlying point that's related to this presentation is conscience, the ability to do the right thing, is an instinct. It is not something that you're going to go off to school to learn or your parents teach you. He's saying it is an instinct. It's part of the deepest inner part of you, and that relates to this presentation. If that's the case, and there is no consequence, I'm just part of the divine, and this is a learning experience. If I want to go off and be Tony Soprano, well, maybe the part of the divine that I am wants to experience Tony Soprano. Kant would probably agree with me and say, what's that instinct for then? What is that moral instinct inside us for? And we know it's there. It's there. We all know that if people just lived without laws, They wouldn't just start being bad people. Think, oh, the only constraint on me not wanting to act out the worst scenes in the movie The Purge is because I was constrained by the law. Now that there's no constraints, oh, I'm just going to go do this felony and that felony and hunt this person down. And come on. Nobody would I don't want to differentiate guys between NPCs I'm talking real human beings of spirit. Okay, we'll get into different types of incarnations at a different time, or who knows how they would react if all laws were removed. But in general, somebody that's a real person, not going to go do all these bad things, because Immanuel Kant would say, he just points out in this writing called Conscience, it just points out what's just obvious. We all have this moral compass inside of us. Why is this instinct inside of us if we're not supposed to live life a certain way? It's an instinct, like a baby born underwater would hold its breath. Society transforms people, gets them to, if this is a flame of instinct, a conscience, a moral compass to do the right thing. Society itself and the corruption and all the things that we talk about via the not-nilk reality and the minions, it extinguishes the flame of being a good moral person. It works you over. And this is the one thing, this instinct inside of us to do the right thing called conscience is one thing that distinguishes us from a lot of animals. Whenever there's a moth or whatever that flies in to this house, the cats will run around and try to kill it. There's no respect for life, or it doesn't want to eat it. It just wants to kill it. Okay, maybe that's not the greatest example, but you understand what I'm saying. It is one thing. This conscience inside of us is one thing that does differentiate us from animals. And what is Ray Liotta and Joe Pesci and their characters in Goodfellas? And there's a million different examples if you don't like those. They're acting like animals. Screw the guy that owns the restaurant, screw him over, run up bad debts on him. Who cares what happens to him and his family? If he looks the wrong way at me, shoot him, the gangsters, whatever. They have no conscience. The society itself, it's maybe one of the main aspects. I have to add that to the concentric circles in my reality model. It destroys conscience. That's one of the things I'm going to add to the model. So we know it's inside of us. What's it? The people that would say, "Oh, we can do anything in this life, and that there's no consequence." Whatever divine aspect of me, whatever I'm attached to, would not allow anything to happen to it. And but fine, but there's different types of consequence. But what's that? I would just start my presentation or my debate back with those people by saying, "What's the conscience, conscience, the moral compass? What's it there for? What's it there inside you for?" Why even make the moral choice? See, this is a huge factor that really can't be ignored by that other side, in my opinion. And this right here is the biggest difference between you and me and the Melvin P. Gateses of the world, or the minions that surround the outer shell of my concentric rings reality model. They have no conscience, do they? No conscience. Well, let's cook up war. Let's cook up world war. What kind of creature could cook up and incite world war? I mean, there should be a term. What's the opposite of no conscience? They have none. Zero conscience. Not only it's people yelling at this presentation, they should be saying, well, man, there's no conscience. They want to do harm. It's not like they have no conscience. They want to do harm. Okay. But this inner, this is this moral compass that gets us to want to do the right thing. Everybody will agree, these minions they don't have it. Okay. Across the board, governors taking podiums and all aspects of the minions, they don't have it. So then that would lead one to conclude that this is something of the highest divine, the highest level of spiritual connection that's in us that they don't have. All right? That brings us back to the point of this presentation. What's it for? What's it for if not to be followed? What's it for if not to do the right thing in this life? What's it for? God just wants to experience anything. And next time I'll come back as Tony Soprano. It's a lot of smart people that have talked about this concept that you have to do everything before you can become an old soul and walk out of here. But I would, if I was taking the podium against these people, I would lead with this conscious part of the debate, and I really would want to know what they would say back. That's that instinct. That's in the deepest aspect of what we call our real selves. That you could see it's the farthest part. What you call your conscience, like back to the concentric rings, the heart center, it's the farthest part from that sick stuff on the outer screen. It's the farthest thing from a Ryan Seacrest presentation. That means it's of the purest part of your spirit. What's it for, if not to do the right thing in this life? So if most people believe there is some sort of consequence for living life a certain way, and there's a variety of different stops along the sliding scale, both in how life can be screwed up and what is the consequence of screwing life up. So the first part of that, one is if somebody's just a complete wasted life. Let's just say they didn't do anything bad to anybody. They didn't harm animals. It's just like a wasted life. We'll talk about that in a moment. But on the other side, you have Idi Amin, or you have people that really are responsible for mass death, and or a Tony Soprano type as this long body count, or things like that. So you have a sliding scale in terms of really not doing things right, or what would be considered right in a lifetime. So we all understand the Tony Soprano types, but the front end is a stockbroker that never hurt anybody, never did anything, or really never harmed animals or anything, but he just followed blips. Every day he followed blips. And some days he made himself $5,000 to $10,000 a day. And he followed blips. Then, he had a couple kids and he put them through college and bought a couple sports cars, had that second home in Avalon, New Jersey, took vacations and figured he was helping the economy through his money multiplier. Every time he went and took a vacation, the money would spread around, and boy, he's helping everybody out. It's like a wasted life. I don't know. I'm sorry. Just following blips without any charity, just following blips to put more zeros and ones and more numbers in an account without really helping anybody or helping animals. Or to me, that's a wasted life. Sorry. So what is the consequence for that different than a Idi Amin or a Tony Soprano? So there's so many different types of variations on this side here. People should be aware that the strict Christian, or it's not just evangelical. I believe many Catholics may, I'm no expert at that, but most of my family, I grew up in a Catholic church, attending the events of other family members who are Catholic. It's very severe, but that's rare. This severity doesn't exist in my understanding. I'm no theology double PhD from some big university, but I don't think the severity does exist outside of Christianity, where you screw this life up, hell, severe consequences. Other religion, Buddhism, talk about going maybe up levels or down levels, but of course it's just a constant reincarnation or experiencing another life. Maybe the layer is lower, like what it seemed like happened to us around 2012. Like we went into some lower level that mimicked our old reality. It was more like hell, like the event horizon, or Hindu of reincarnation. The Christianity of it's all or nothing based on this tiny little 1/1,000,000th of 1 second. That's rare. Okay, that's not the way most religions work around the world. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the monks or the shamans hovering over the body, trying to connect to the spiritual self, trying to get the spiritual self to realize that it is past and to make the right decisions in this critical time period before it will just recycle right back into a body. And I'm no expert at the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Trust me, I'm no expert. I didn't go over there with Brad Pitt for 7 years, but it's the concept is, the spiritual self in this death just creates another illusory reality where they don't realize they're dead. Two things come to mind. The movie The Sixth Sense, although in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's like, if the spirit doesn't realize it's dead, it will be haunted by these demons and that demons, very, very, very nasty things, with the key concept being it must realize it's dead. Guess what that brings me back to? It brings me back to, again, what happened to us, or what happened to me with that tree outside. It probably killed me, because all reality it's a mimic of what the reality was, but everything is kind of like a little hell layer. Everything seems the same. I take a bite of the glazed donut. It still seems like the glazed donut I remember from the Ocean City Boardwalk in the 80s or whatever, but it's a mimic of everything. But it's like a little mini hell layer, what's going on. It's kind of like, yes, did the world change in 2012, potentially with the Mayan calendar, or about that time? But that was also about the time, I've talked about it in the past, and I don't want to get into it now, the damn tree I cut down. It should have killed me. I couldn't believe it didn't crush me. It was like hanging on something like right above my head. I'll get into it some other time. But the point is, maybe it killed me. And this is like a 40-day thing, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. There's like shamans and monks hanging over me saying, Matt, realize you're dead, man. Didn't you see the Sixth Sense? You're dead. Let's spend a little bit each day saying, if I was dead, what would that mean? Or how would I beat this game if I realized I was actually killed? I know this is a weird stray, guys, and I haven't completely lost my faculties. It's just, the point is, again, these Tibetan Book of the Dead, these people, this heritage, history, whatever, that goes back thousands of years. They kind of know something. They probably know something. They're not just a bunch of idiots roaming around with the Sherpas trying to get drunk with the lamas. They probably know something. And the big concept of it is to get the spiritual self to realize it has passed and to do certain things, not fall or be scared of the demons that it itself is creating, that then will bring it back into another lifetime. So don't ever forget, this could be, you could be living the Sixth Sense right now. Keep that in mind. If that's the case, how do you beat it? How do you walk out of it? If you talk to those monks or shamans, or I don't know exactly what to call them, in Tibet that hover over the body, and you could say, what if I could give you a little tool here that would be able to communicate directly with the spiritual aspect of who this person was? Would that be helpful to you? And the monk would be like, if I could talk to him just for a minute, it would be incredibly helpful. I don't know if he's hearing me or not. I would say, dude, you need to understand you're dead. And here's what, stop creating your own demons around you because you're dead. Probably that's what we're doing now in this hell layer. I'm not going to keep bringing that back in, guys. We'll talk about that some other time. I know that I guess at first I was saying that's a way out crazy philosophy, but what'll happen? The more we think about it, the more it probably isn't that way out. The more like, why are we, we're like all stuck in Neo's limbo, like the train man's limbo. We're this weird little group. Yeah, okay, hundreds of thousands, but little compared to everybody else around us. We're this little group that sees things. Nobody else can see it. Maybe it's some limbo layer for us, maybe. We all died. Who knows? But we've said things like, my best friend, you don't seem like my best friend anymore. He would have seen this shit. The old Tony or whatever, he would have seen right through this stuff. And they just keep falling for the same ridiculous schemes. It's like it seems like there's supposed to be 7 billion people here, but there's only a real small number of real spirits like trapped in some Tibetan Book of the Dead netherworld. So if I'm going to keep that on the table, I'm going to wake up every morning and say, if I'm dead, then I will eventually be able to see through this facade. And even people say time's changing. To me, time's changing as well. You can't get anything done during the day. The day's over like that. January went by. I just snapped. I don't know if you heard it. I can't really snap too good. I don't snap too good. January went by. Oh, I don't know. It didn't seem like 5 minutes. It seemed like 5 seconds. I don't understand time anymore. And someone would say, well, Matt, we're not in this 40-day. Maybe I don't know what it is for Tibetan Book of the Dead. Maybe it's 45 days. I don't know. I'm not relating that to the 40 days and 40 nights or Christian thing. It's around 40 days, whatever this period before they recycle back. And someone said, well, Matt, I know time has changed, but certainly, it's been years since 2012, or if there was a reset of some kind or a cataclysm, or you died because of that tree dropped on you. And that doesn't work. You can't say time itself in a different incarnation or a different aspect of consciousness, or I'm not really sure how to say it, but like, are you sure time in a dream is exactly the same as time in this reality? Goes back to the Star Trek episode, I forget the name of it, The Next Generation with Picard. There is a probe that the Enterprise comes upon. The probe beams something into Picard's head. He falls down and passes out on the bridge. He's out or unconscious for about 15 minutes on the bridge. But during that time, he lives an entire 70-year or 60 or 70-year lifetime on another planet. The probe beamed in the entire, memories or experiences of a long dead planet, a planet that had died out, millions of years ago or whatever, beamed in all the experiences of that. And he lived a life of 70 years, say, in 15 minutes. And when he, that's what most of the episode is, him living the life, which of course was just a fiction. So I don't think time has nothing to do with it. If we're 6 cents dead, just because it seems like years have gone by, I don't think it would matter. I don't think time would have the same issues. Whatever, it could seem like hundreds of lifetimes in that 40-day period where that the Tibetan Book of the Dead talk about. Dolores Cannon talked about something which to me sounds like old soul, new soul type of thing, or just certain people not being ready. And I know 10% of you are rolling your eyes. Oh, Dolores Cannon. Is there anybody that you know in the modern era that has it all figured out? Please let me know. Is there anybody that has it all figured out? No. So we listen to a variety of different smart people. People like Manly P. Hall. I listen to a lot of Manly P. Hall, as much as I can. He's got so many different works and lectures. I don't care if he's a 33rd degree Freemason. I feel confident in my inner knowing, where if something isn't right or something is potentially manipulation, I feel confident I'll be able to see through it. But there's a lot of truth there. The books of Zygmunt Brzezinski, there's a lot of truth in there. I feel confident in myself that I can see through the bull crap. So it just to not listen to somebody because there's a label on them. I mean, come on. We're all pretty experienced in this reality stuff at this point. We can see through the bullshit, and there's something you can take away from any smart person giving their opinion, no matter how much of a manipulation you think it may be. You take away the 10 to 15% that really resonates with your inner knowing, and if you have to ignore the rest, ignore the rest. I listen to Dolores Cannon. There's a lot of what she says where I said, yeah, that's probably the way it works. So she talks about people like not being ready. And, she was one of the original ones to talk about the concept of the NPC. But in terms of real spiritual beings, you wouldn't be here listening to this if you were an NPC. Talked about just people, you're not ready. There's things that this relates back to consequence. Ready for what? What consequence to living your life a certain way? I mean, doesn't it seem obvious that this life is difficult on purpose, and there are tools here and things you can use to get yourself to a certain place? That's consequence. If you decide to not use any of the tools that this place can give you in a variety of different ways to use them on yourself, then do you think you're going to get to the exact same place as some people do, as somebody that comes into this life and very early on at age 28 or something, they say, wait a second, this existence, this lifetime it's given me a lot of different tools here, a lot of different things I can use to make myself better in a lot of different places. I'm going to start applying those lessons, and I'm going to start using those tools right away. So someone that devotes their life to that, they're going to be in the exact same place that somebody comes in here and says, I'm sure the divine wants to experience Tony Soprano, so I'll just go do that. I just can't see. This is my personal beliefs. I just can't see how that would be. These people would end up in the exact same hot tub time machine. They'd be in the same place at the end of this race. I just don't see it. I mean, I tried to present the case the best I could for those that believe wholeheartedly that there is no negative consequence at all for living in any way you want to live. But to me, the evidence is overwhelming. It's not hellfire consequence, but there's some sort of consequence. Maybe it'll take you longer. Maybe it'll take more lifetimes. I just don't see how a Tony Soprano lifetime is as valid as somebody that's constantly trying to use every life lesson and as a tool to apply it to themselves. I mean, one of the keys of life to me is every single thing that's thrown at us is, no matter how horrible or how frustrating, is what can this do for me? You know, somebody that applies every situation into what can this ultimately do for me? You know, that I talked about months ago, that truck going 18 miles an hour up to 25 and I'm behind him for 20 minutes. Every time I wanted to turn left, he'd go left, and he wouldn't let me by. All he had to do was pull over, and there's, there was 100 cars lined up behind me. The guy was so inconsiderate. All he had to do, he had 5, 6 places he could pull over and say, okay, everybody come by, I've burned you enough. And then I'm getting frustrated, and I'm beeping at him. You son of a bitch! But I'm like, wait a second. I'm losing this test here. What can this? And I didn't even do this at the time, but ultimately, the best thing to have done would be, how can I use this situation to make myself better? I think that is absolutely at the root of what life is all about. And the most important thing to close with is the risk-reward balance, or weighing the risk versus the reward. What is the risk of saying, I believe there is no consequence to how I live my life, and living it however, hopefully not like Tony Soprano, but what is the risk-reward? What's the reward for living your life as Tony Soprano? I keep using that example, but there's plug in a million different things there. Or even the completely wasted life of following the blips. What's the reward? Well, the reward is only in this material plane. The reward is only in this 3D existence, in this thing called Earth. What do you get? A better lease on a car. You get a couple more pieces of materialism. You get jacked off a few more times. And what's the reward? If you back up far enough and you believe you're part of something that always was and always will be, there's no reward. This is a joke. We're here for like one trillionth of a millisecond. So the risk reward doesn't make any sense. It's like, well, if I'm not sure, the risk reward means I'm damn well going to make sure I use every single thing, every single tool that this reality throws at me as a way to propel myself forward. Because from ultimately an evangelical Christian standpoint, the risk reward, nothing could be more severe than that. This motivates, the risk reward is actually what motivates a lot of, I don't want to put words in their mouth. You don't understand where I'm going there, but think of the risk for not getting it right, Matt. Internal damnation, that's a big risk reward, so that risk reward is something that can't be discarded here. And I apply this all the time, not to these big topics, but just little things. Like Pam goes on an ice hike. She goes on an ice hike. I just don't understand. And she's already she's apt to fall down and think she's a little clumsy sometimes. And I just don't understand the risk reward of an ice hike where a guide is helping you up the side of a frozen river. The reward is you have a nice day and, get a little exercise and see some ice and it's pretty pictures. But maybe that's the reward. I hope I didn't say that's the risk. The risk is, think anything could happen on the side of the ice. And I broke my leg once. It's just, you're talking about months and a cast. Your whole life is a mess. You can't get around. Then there's rehab. I don't understand the risk reward of an ice hike. So apply that same risk reward to doing the right things for yourself, for your God, for your higher self, whatever. See, you're not really considering risk reward, just saying, well, I don't think there's any consequence, so I'm going to, it kind of relates to, it's kind of like do without wilt. But the risk reward is always going to be part of, what I factor into my equation. Then there's thousands of mini decisions of risk reward that relate to the bigger picture of, is there consequence for living life a certain way, a spiritual consequence. And here we go. What's the biggest decision people are going to have to make? At least in this community, it's a decision for many people. For many, it's a non-decision, but you know what I mean. The action, the Carl Weathers action Jacksonation, starring Carl Weathers. What do you say in Rocky as Apollo Creed? No, it's all in the name. It's all in the marketing. Look at this. Who's this? He says the I. He's the Italian stallion. He doesn't say the Italian stallion. He says, look at this, the Italian stallion. That's a little I thrown in verbally. That's like a John McEnroe, you cannot be serious catch. One of my claims to fame. But anyway, the risk reward on the Carl Weathers action Jacksonation. Now, there is no risk reward at all for people like my father. There's no, okay, he might say there's a one tiny little risk that you could get some adverse effect, but he doesn't understand a risk reward for your very spiritual essence, or we would take it to that level. Many people here will take it to that level, of course, that it could doom you, or he doesn't see it like that. There could be a slight downside physically, or you could get balls palsy, or whatever. The risk is just a tiny little thing that could be like a physical adverse effect, and the reward is, oh my gosh, the action Jacksonation and returning to normal life. See, there's no risk reward for people like my father. It's all reward. All he knows is this matrix. He doesn't care to know anything but this matrix, and the best he can hope for is just I told him, I said, you'll repeat, you'll recycle. He was actually excited. I've mentioned this before. He was excited about that I told him he'll probably just recycle in another life. He pictures himself as a high school basketball and baseball player again, trying to get a cheerleader. He was excited. He was actually excited about the concept of coming back and reliving his high school glory days. I said to him, well, how do you know you'll come back as a white male outside of Philadelphia with good athletic ability? Maybe you'll come back as a one-legged man outside living in the slums of Delhi in the airport landing pattern, sharing, from a bathroom perspective, sharing the same hole in the ground with 4,000 other people. How do you know you're going to come back as a white male, that's going to go to Abington High School? See how that might not work out, Dad? He didn't understand that. Oh, that's right. If I come back, I could be one of them pygmies that they talk about in Africa or something. Yeah. See, it's not just the same old. Not like you're not going to be the same guy again, right? That was that threw him for a loop. To him, there's no spiritual risk reward for taking the action Jacksonation. The first day it was available, he started calling up. There's 4 million people trying to make the call, and you can only call between this time and that time. He wanted me to call up. He said, you got to help make the phone call. The whole family's got to call, and because one of us will eventually break through. It's like trying to get Rolling Stones tickets in the first 30 seconds, and when Ticketmaster opens up for the ticket line, he's calling and calling and calling. Oh, he worked his butt off. And very soon after it was available, he was able to score the action Jacksonation. He was able to score, bam, the home of rock and roll, bam. But for people like us, people like me, people like you, the risk reward, there's a spiritual, potentially a very major spiritual consequence to the action Jacksonation. If it was just about an adverse effect to the body, or even a Borg 7 of 9 nanoparticulates, and that just affects my body. I mean, I would probably get it. I don't care. I don't see people place so much emphasis on the avatar, the body. I don't care. I just nanoparticulates or what is. I'm only here to enhance my spirit or my soul, or to protect it. I've talked about it's not always about. Sometimes the reality gets to a certain place where it's not about leveling up and ascension. It's about holding on to your nature. Right now it's time to survive. It's what the Robert the Bruce the Fifth said to Robert the Bruce the Sixth, the guy that got the, I guess he got the leprosy or whatever, Robert the Bruce's father in Edinburgh in Braveheart. And he's like, wait a second, before you go charging off and you want to do all these things and enhance your soul and spirit, that's not part of the movie, of course, but before you want to go charging off with this William Wallace, know this, Edward the Longshanks is the most ruthless king to ever to sit on the throne of England. And, he basically says, it's time to survive. We just need to get through this period. It ain't time to get more lands or more titles, whatever. With this Edward the Longshanks on the throne, it's time to survive. So we have like Edward the Longshanks on the throne here. All these New Age people or whatever, they get the bad rap, but there are a lot of good people with a lot of good ideas, but they want to level up, they want to ascend. Even I've talked about using tools. But I'm more apt to use these tools to hold on to spiritual self. Spiritual self is being ripped from most people now. It's time to survive from a spiritual perspective. So if I knew 100% that the Action Jacksonation had no effect whatsoever on my connection to higher self, my connection to source, my connection to God, my spiritual self, my way out of here spiritually, I don't not care about the body. I'm not talking about the body. Who cares? That's one little 100 millisecond train stop. I mean, who cares? It's all about spiritual self. But no one's ever going to be able to convince me that there's no spiritual ramifications of taking the Action Jacksonation. Therefore, risk reward dictates that, what's the reward? That I can go to I can go to the next Metallica concert when they get together again with a Linkin Park without Chester? What's the reward? Is that the reward? I can go to Metallica, get drunk in a big concert setting, or go to the NFL, maybe hook up with some roadie girl and get jacked off behind the tour buses. That's the reward? What's the risk? Well, the risk is you made the wrong choice. You just doomed yourself spiritually. See, the risk reward, it's like 400 million tons on one side of the scale and like half a piece of rice on the other. Guys, this less filling versus taste great debate will continue. My goal here is just to float some ideas in a different way to get you thinking about things a little bit differently. Just want to close with this. An update on Free Voice. Freevoice.io, not .com. Freevoice.io is pretty much built. We don't know how the transition is going to work, what will be left of this YouTube channel in 6 months. I don't know, but the most important point now is there's protection in case the channel is nuked. No matter what happens, you'll always be able to find me at freevoice.io, or if you forget that, remember, no hobo code. Always can go there to give your information to nohobocode.com. And there's my website will always remain too, quantumofconscience.com. So there is backup protection. Now, how the transition is actually going to work, I will talk about that the first time I make a talking video, or maybe I'll come back in a day or two and do a talking video where you can see me and talk about how that's going to work. But YouTube created a situation, and we'd be fools to just hope our masters like what we're talking about. And if another strike comes, then I can go back to them and just beg and plead. And, oh, please let me speak again. I won't do it again. Enough of this. I'm just tired of this horrible, whatever, guys. We need the transition will be laid out the next time I make a video where it's just me talking to you. And thanks for listening to this one.